In this video, we'll be learning about the vertical line test. Now, the vertical line test is a simple graphical test that allows us to determine whether or not a curve represents a function. Now, the key thing to remember is that for any input a function takes, it produces one single output. And that sentence really validates the vertical line test. Now, let's go ahead and see how it works, or how the vertical line test can be used, with a couple of examples. Now, considering the following curve, let's say we're asked whether or not this curve represents a function. Well, the idea, or the method with the vertical line test, is to see whether or not we can draw any vertical lines that cut the curve in more than one point. So, looking at this curve, we can see that we can draw vertical lines here that only cut the curve once, but we can also draw vertical lines here that cut the curve in more than one point. Now, what this means is that this curve does not represent a function. In other words, this curve fails the vertical line test. And I'll just write this here. It fails the vertical line test. And this in turn means that this curve does not represent a function, and it does not have an equation y equals to f of x. That's y is not equal to f of x in this case. And it's that simple. That's the vertical line test. Let's look at another example. Let's say we're given this curve, and again we're asked whether or not this curve represents a function. Well, once again, with the vertical line test, we're going to go ahead and see whether or not we can draw any vertical lines that cut the curve more than once. So, drawing some vertical lines here, we quickly see that no matter where we draw the vertical line, it only cuts the curve in one point. What this means is that this curve passes the vertical line test, and this curve does represent a function. So, I'll just write that below. This passes the vertical line test, and this curve has an equation y equals to f of x. And so one may ask why this test works. Well, the reason why it works really goes back to the definition of a function. Remember, for each input a function takes, it produces one single output, which we wrote up here. So looking at this curve that failed the vertical line test, we can see that when the vertical line cuts the curve more than once, at the same value of x, there are two different y values on the curve. And that would mean that the function would be producing two different outputs. Therefore, it's not a function. So remember, the vertical line test. If the vertical line cuts the curve in more than one point, then that curve does not represent a function. If a vertical line only cuts a curve in one point along its length, then that curve represents a function. And there you go.